or for the rest of you, start it in the first place. And calling the meeting to order at 7:05. Hello, everybody. I'm Laura Myers. I, along with John Arnold, am co-chairs. We are co-chairs of UNNC's Planning and Zoning Committee, and I am on the board. I live in Angeles Vista, and I've been the chair of Planning and Zoning from inception, whatever year that was it 2004? Whatever. John, to you.
I am John Arnold, Jefferson Park. I've been in the UNNC board since 2007, and I am a multi-family architect.
So, should we do other introductions, or should we get going? What do you think, John? I mean, people are still joining.
Yeah,
we can.
I think, does anyone want to introduce themselves and tell them, maybe do that way, raise your hand or just start talking? We can unmute everybody. Audrey.
My name is Audrey Arlington. I'm a longtime resident of Jefferson Park, and where we have a great many ADUs under construction. And it's a subject I'm been interested in for a long time, and I've tracked for a long time, since about the late 1980s, when the state legislature decided this would be a good idea. And I look forward to the presentation.
And Audrey is a longtime planner for the Beverly Hills Planning Department, as I recall.
I'm Michael Kimbrough. I also sit on the UNNC board. I develop real estate for a living. I've done a number of ADUs in the area. I have my camera off because I'm in the witness protection program. And that's it.
Okay. Anyone else?
Sure. I'm Blake McCormick. I'm a resident of Harvard Heights for 11 years, and I'm just an interested citizen.
Okay. Anybody else want to introduce yourself?
Same thing as Blake, I guess. Bob McDuff, Angeles Vista. I have a sort of single family residence, but we have a rental property in the back that was originally rented back in 1940s, mid 40s. And my wife is a former city planner.
Okay.
Which city was she a planner for?
Orinda.
In Northern California.
Right.
That's in Orinda from when I was 4 until I was 8, Bob.
I'm sorry. She's done some work for Orinda Lafayette, but thanks for the correction. It was actually La Cañada that she worked at for 5 years.
Okay.
Okay.
Anyone else want to be brave and introduce themselves, or shall we move on?
I'll go ahead and introduce myself real quick. Just Paul King. I live in Kenny Heights. I'm a representative at large on the UNNC Council. I try to attend as many of these meetings as I can, and this one in particular is of interest to me because of the ADU topic.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so I'm going to share the agenda on the screen, and moving to the actual agenda part. So what we just did was welcome, call to order, introductions, and just before we hit approval of the agenda, I like to explain that the way United Neighborhoods Neighborhood Council has set up our committees is that we appoint the chairs and the co-chairs only, and otherwise the committee membership, as it were, is whoever, which if you're a stakeholder and you're present at a committee meeting, you are a member of that committee for the duration of the meeting. And that means you can make motions and vote and participate fully. Any action that we may take tonight or at any meeting is a recommendation to the governing board. It is not a final decision, and that is why any stakeholder may participate, like I said, in full. And thus, here we have the agenda in front of us. The basic agenda is public comments, this main item all about ADUs, and then potentially just some follow-up to previous cases and, you know, announcements about status of cases. And what I need is a motion to approve the agenda and a second.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
And I'll second.
Okay, Blake seconds. So it's been moved. Was it Blake who
I
seconded
think it
it?
was Michael. Michael
Michael
second.
seconded, because Blake looks to be muted, so he couldn't have seconded. Okay, so I'm going to stop the screen share, and just say all in favor. You can unmute and say aye or raise your hand in the you know, on screen. Okay, or in the little blue banner of a Zoom meeting. Okay, motion passes unless there's any opposition. Okay, and then the other thing, just to do the housekeeping, if you're new to Zoom or no one has really explained it to you, if you are looking at your computer screen and have a cursor, you can move around at the bottom of the black screen. You can click on the word participants, and you will bring up a box that lists not only everybody who's here tonight, but also at the bottom of that, kind of however you've set your screen. So in my case, it's a vertical, long, skinny box. At the bottom of it, you'll have the ability to raise your hands, and it brings up a little blue hand. So
Laura,
yes?
that's not entirely true for me, as
As
it
you-
may well be for others. We have a little smiley face at the bottom
Oh,
that
great.
says reactions.
Yes.
Yes, well, that's the other, yes, if you do not, well, no, you have the blue hand, the ability to raise your hand is at the bottom of the participants box.
Actually, I
If
think
you can pull
think
that
Not
up.
on Apple
moved it.
computer.
They moved it,
Reactions is
Laura.
on mine too.
All
they
right,
moved-
well, then
they
I don't
moved-
know what to say.
They moved it, Lori. It's under, Michael's right. It's under reactions. You hit reactions and there's a whole bar there called.
Okay, wait, I'm gonna click on reactions. Well, there's a whole bar under reactions, but there's not a raise hand function.
So I think you might have an old version of Zoom.
I keep mine updated, but what I have is a meetings version and not a webinar version.
So
Whatever.
somewhere down at the bottom, click until you find a raise.
Well, because I'm the host, I don't even have the ability to raise
Just
my
raise your
hand.
hand. We're
Yeah,
small.
all I can do is this. So you're right. I need to test this out sometime when I'm not the host, so I can give this instruction. Here's the real point, folks. You have the ability to unmute yourself, but I would really prefer that you somehow or another raise your hand rather than talking over each other. So we have the laxitude where everybody has the function to unmute themselves. Please only do that when somebody else is not speaking. Try to raise your hand if you wish to speak. That would be with the blue hand, the reactions hand, the real hand, or you can chat to me or to John and say, I can't raise my hand, I'm having trouble. Can you call on me? And then if all else fails, then blurt out.
Give it up.
But don't blurt out as your first choice. Okay, is that fair enough? And having said that, the next item is public comments. That would be general public comments on anything not on tonight's agenda. And if you have a public comment, please raise any one of those darn hands.
I see none.
Okay, well then, John, I'm turning this to you.
Great. Yeah,
And,
thanks, Laura.
and guys, I'm going to have to click on one of these reactions because it won't leave my screen until I do. So I'm clicking on a reaction. Yay. And now go ahead, John.
So good evening, everybody. So a little preamble before I hand it over to Kevin. So about 3 years ago, Kevin and I, you might recall that there were all sorts of things coming out of Sacramento, AB XYZ and SB 324, that all had to do with housing. They were coming out literally like every other week, another one would come out. And so I approached Kevin, who likes to wonk out on planning department issues like I do. And I said, Kevin, we got to have some way to track these because that's our job as architects. When a client calls us, that we know what the answer, if we hear AB 234, we know what they're talking about. So I asked Kevin to start tracking all the legislative updates, which he's done fastidiously. And it's been really helpful for us as architects to know what's going on. So Laura and I had an idea to have a public information session, which is tonight, about ADUs to serve the UNNC community and maybe even beyond that, but we're not sure about that. So we'll see if we have other opportunities to present it. So Kevin put together this presentation, which he'll start in a second. I just have 2 disclaimers I want to say. We did the best we can to assemble the best information we could, but if you're planning on an ADU, please do your research and use this as a general guide only. But so keep that in mind. And also just to keep any conflict of interest at bay, we do not do ADUs at KFA. We do multifamily housing. So this is not an advertisement for our firm. This is truly spreading the wealth of our knowledge. And that's what Kevin's departure point was, to put this together for the public benefit. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin.
All right. Hello, everyone. Share my screen. Can you see the presentation or do you see something else?
I see the presentation.
Okay. Just want to make sure it had the right screen. Okay. Let's see. Is it not working? Present. Okay. So you guys can see it?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
At least I can.
Yes.
All right, great. Okay, so thank you, John. So yes, I'm Kevin Ford from KFA, and today I'll be presenting what has been going on in this very active world of building ADUs, both in California as a whole and especially in Los Angeles over the last few years. So as John said, I've been involved here at KFA with tracking everything that's been going on in terms of housing legislation, local zoning changes, construction issues, and how people decide to pay for and use ADUs if they choose to build them. And so that's what we'll be talking about tonight. All right, so what is an ADU? So an ADU goes by many names. People have called them granny flats, in-law units, casitas, etc. But it is simply just a secondary home and or apartment unit that you build on your property. Now, most people build them in their backyards, but technically they can be built in almost any location on your property as long as you meet local zoning and building codes. All right, so when many people think of ADUs or granny flats, they usually picture kind of a cute little cottage bungalow thing in a backyard. And they do, have that, but in fact, ADUs, as they're currently regulated and used in California, can take many different forms. So as we see here, let's see, I don't know if this is in the way of everyone.
Nope, we're good.
We're good. We can see
Okay,
it.
I thought my pictures of you guys was in the way, but never mind. Okay, all right. So as we can see here, they can be detached. They can also be an addition to or a complete renovation of a garage that you have on your property. They can be converting part of your existing home into a separate living unit, or they can be just a simple addition to your home. And there's actually a few other different arrangements that you can do. So here's just a few pictures of what we're talking about here. I should note that all of these varieties that I'm showing here are of the detached variety, but like we just said, there's different kinds. They don't all have to be detached from your home. Some can be in your home. Okay, so why has there been so much talk and excitement about ADUs lately in California? So for many years, zoning and building code laws were in place that made it very difficult to build an ADU for a homeowner. So this has been in contrast to other cities and states, places like Austin, Oregon, or even Vancouver, for example, who I understand have been building what we call ADUs for a long time. However, starting in 2016 and 2017, a series of laws began to be passed here in California at the state level, and these laws were meant to break down barriers and make it easier for people to build ADUs. And so the thinking here is that ADUs are kind of a low-hanging fruit people consider for tackling California's housing issues. And so it's a solution that does not require government subsidy. And so that's a reason why government has kind of gravitated towards it and is trying to, again, knock down barriers for it. So these various bills, and there's been about 6 of them between 2017 and 2020, they deal with things like impact fees. So for a number of years, homeowners would have to pay very expensive impact fees for school and parks and whatnot. And so a law was passed in 2017 that you would not have to pay any impact fees if you built an ADU over 750 square feet. Another series of laws were passed that that permits had to be approved quickly. Discretionary reviews were limited under HPOZs, and there were some parking changes if you are if your home is close to transit, and we'll go over that in a second. And then in 2020, they introduced a junior ADU, which is a 500 square foot maximum ADU that's in a single home, and that's something that can be built and permitted really quickly. Okay, so as you can see, these laws have been having a big effect in terms of the number of permits that have been issued for ADUs in California and the number that have been built since about 2017. So you can see, 2014, 2015, 2016, there wasn't that much activity. And then all of a sudden in 2017, it's skyrocketed and grown, 400% or 500% every single year. And in fact, Los Angeles actually leads California in the number of ADU permits by quite a bit. Okay, so why would someone choose to build an accessory dwelling unit? Well, there are 4 main reasons that people usually consider when they want to build one, and it's kind of what makes them a potential attractive proposition. So a property owner can earn rental income if they decide to rent the unit out. We'll look at a sample calculation of what this can look like later. Number 2, building a secondary livable structure on a property can increase the value of the property. Number 3, ADUs allow you to create living spaces for your extended family. And there is, in fact, no requirement that if you build an ADU, you must rent it to an outside tenant. You can use it for family or for kids returning from college or what have you. And in fact, about 70% of the people so far in the state that have built ADUs use them for this purpose rather than for renting them out. And then lastly, from a government perspective, building these is kind of a more gentle way to increase density that doesn't affect neighborhood character as much as other projects might. Okay, so you're thinking of taking the plunge, but the first question is, who does the work of actually building an ADU, and do I need to hire an architect? The answer is no. So, but building an ADU is actually not that much different from building a normal house because it's really just a smaller version of a normal house. And if there's one lesson I kind of want to impart in this talk, it's that an ADU is not just a simple thing that you can plop down in your yard. Unfortunately, it's something that takes a lot of know-how to get right. So it would be prudent to find someone who's knowledgeable about building ADUs and a person that or a company that knows what the zoning and building requirements actually are. And secondly, you need to find a builder, a contractor who's experienced in building ADUs. There are peculiar things about building one of these in versus a normal house. Like for instance, you're building something in someone's backyard rather than having kind of a clean slate and being able to build in the front yard. So you want someone that kind of understands how all of that works. And so sometimes, just to know, the builder can actually also be the designer. And there are many companies out there already that will offer an entire kind of turnkey solution for you. So it's a very kind of growing industry like that. All right, so you've decided you want to move forward a little bit, you've selected someone to work with, and the next thing you need to know is how do you actually bring one of these to fruition. So similarly to a normal design project, you kind of have 3 distinct phases that you go through. You have a design phase, You have a permitting phase with the city, and then you have a construction phase where you build it. So here we're just going to go through some of the things that you need to consider in each phase. And I think in doing this, it will kind of give you a sense of all of the issues and complexities that can actually arise. So in the design phase, what you really need to remember when you're designing this is that, again, it is actually a structure that someone is meant to be able to live in. So it needs to have all of the elements and many of the bells and whistles that a normal house would have. And oftentimes this is mandated by code. So some things that you need to think about, zoning restrictions, which we'll talk about in a second. You are required to have basically a full kitchen and a bathroom. The structure needs foundation walls and roofs and walls that will stand up in earthquakes and storms and whatnot. You need to provide light and air to whoever will be staying in there. And you want to make sure that it's a comfortable place for them, especially if you're going to rent it out. You have to make sure that someone can exit the building safely in a fire. And of course, you'll need plumbing, electricity, and probably air conditioning and everything like that. And another kind of interesting thing that is not on here is this ADU will actually most likely have its own address. So you even need to coordinate with the post office to do that. So you've done your design phase. So now you move into your permitting phase. So you take your drawings with your builder into the city, like any typical home building project, and you'll have your design drawings reviewed by all of the various city departments. So I won't go through all of these, but as you can see, it's suffice to say that it's a full docket of departments like normal that needs to review your ADU. So once we've gotten everything permitted by the city, we can go to the construction phase. This is where an experienced builder comes in because, like I said, there's some peculiar items, and they can help you with things like, you need to do drainage ditches, you need to provide utilities, electricity to the structure, both during construction and obviously when it's done. You need to be able to actually bring the construction items into your backyard, and you can do either a custom build or you can do a prefabricated unit. But a problem with prefabricated units, oftentimes in urban environments like what we live in, is that if you have power lines that are above ground, oftentimes the large pieces that make up the prefab unit actually cannot fit through all of that and through your side yard and into your backyard. So that can become a problem. And then of course you as the homeowner will want some privacy during construction. So trying to minimize construction time and giving yourself some privacy and noise reduction, all that is important too. And people that build ADUs a lot are aware of all these items. Okay, so even after going through all this, and you kind of are going through this with open eyes, you want to know, so what can I actually build? So that's a very good question. There's a lot of possibilities, as we can see here. So we'll take a look at just two possible examples just to kind of show you how this works from this zoning matrix, which is actually the LA zoning matrix that will tell you what you can build depending on your situation. So example number one, you live in an R1 single family only zone. You're allowed to build one ADU and you need to renovate part of your house. We don't need to, but typically in an R1 zone, you'll mostly renovate part of your house to make it a fully separate living unit. And in this situation, there actually is no size limit for the ADU, but you just need to make sure that it stays within the walls of the existing house. However, you are able to add 150 square feet. So just know that you can add 150 square feet to the outside of your house, but it needs to solely be for like a separate entry and exit or for accessibility ramps or whatnot. And then for parking, everyone wants to always know about parking. So the base is that you need to provide one stall However, and this is the case with many people, if you live within 1/2 mile of any transit stop, so that can be a bus, that can be a train, it doesn't have to be a major transit stop, just any transit stop, you are allowed to do 0 stalls. And so say you renovate an attached garage and you remove the parking stall that you had in the garage to make this ADU, you actually don't need to replace that lost parking, and you also do not need to add new parking for the new resident that would be living there. However, again, that's only if you're within 1/2 mile of transit. So that's kind of example number 1.
Kevin, that's, you aren't, if you're in an R1, you don't have to make an addition. You could make it a true ADU
Yeah, that's right.
in an R1. So that's just an example doing a building conversion, not the
Right,
only
and
use.
Laura's jumping in too. There's in the grid that you showed 2 slides back. Some of the parking is not required in HPOZs. I mean, there's another page to the grid, I should say. So
Yeah.
so within our HPOZs, mostly you also do not need to have the parking for reasons that I'm not sure of, but I think it's because they don't want to have parking in front yards in HPOZ. So for whatever, I don't know the reasoning. So
Anyway, sorry,
anyway.
Kevin, I just wanted to clarify that because it made it sound like it was the only option if you were in an R1 zone.
Correct.
Yeah, no, and I actually confused myself there for a second. I wanted to show one example of a detached and one example of an attached.
Right.
Which means attached to the main house, and so I combined the 2. But yes, with a single family only zone, an R1 zone, you definitely can do a detached unit. So I apologize if that was confusing.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
Both of us, sorry.
No, it's fine. I was confusing myself for a second. Okay, so for R2 or R3 zoning, for example, 2, so you're in a zone that is mostly single family, but you are allowed to do some small multifamily. You are allowed to build 1 ADU. It can actually be up to 1,200 square feet, so fairly large. And it also can be 2-story, so you are actually able to put parking, a little parking stall below if you want. However, you don't have to, and we'll get to that again. Your setbacks are the same as the main house, or they say 4 feet. And to be quite candid, I'm not quite sure how that works. If your house is an 8-foot setback, I'm not sure if you have to stick to the main house or what they will allow you to do to only do a 4-foot setback. But nevertheless, that's what it says, and I haven't dealt with that personally. So, and then parking is the same situation. So it's normally 1 stall, but again, if you're within 1/2 mile of transit, you do not need to add new parking, and you don't need to replace any lost parking. Okay, so this sounds, if this sounds like maybe a good idea for you, but of course everyone wants to know, rightly so, what is the cost going to be? So we'll talk averages here a little bit, just to give you a sense of cost and to give you a little bit of a sense of a payback of what you can get with an ADU. All right, so this is kind of important to remember if you talk to anyone in the future, a builder or a company, but the average construction cost currently in LA for a 750 square foot ADU is $148,000. And that's construction cost only, so that's only to build it. And that comes out to about $200 per square foot. Now, of course, it can be higher the more you want to kind of trick this thing out. And it can go a little bit lower if you do a prefabricated unit, but I would say 200 is kind of on the low end, but more or less average. And so what you need to know about these 2 numbers is that, especially in dealing with the prefab companies, they'll tell you that they can give you an ADU for, $190,000. Well, they're definitely leaving out all of the other costs. And so we'll look at some of that now. So there are, as with a typical home, there are a lot of other costs. There's utilities, there's impact fees. Of course, like I said earlier, if your ADU is below 750 square feet, you don't have to pay an impact fee. And the impact fees can be quite large. I actually heard about one in Silicon Valley where the impact fee was almost $80,000 before they passed legislation stopping that. So, and then you have permit fees. You have to pay the designer, engineer, contractor, There's fees that go along with the financing, and then you have increased insurance and property taxes for your property, and of course that goes on annually for as long as you own the property. So the real cost, and again, this is ballpark on average, is about $240,000 for a 750 square foot or a little bit above ADU, and that's actually about $325 a square foot. So again, just kind of remember, these numbers aren't exact, but if you are ever given a really low ballpark number that seems too good to be true, it probably is, and there's things being left out. Okay, let's see, where am I? So, okay, so that sounds like a lot of money, and you may be asking yourself, well, what can I actually get as a payback on this? So as this shows, it's kind of an example between, you have this $240,000 that you use to build this ADU. If you invested in the stock market, 7% return for 5 years, you would gain $96,600 in this situation. Now, if you built an ADU, and this is one of the main reasons that this industry has kind of taken off, is that it can give you a much higher return than, say, a typical investment. And so if you build a ADU for $240,000, you have 4% home appreciation, which is probably on the low end for Los Angeles. And this is important, if you decide to rent it out to an outside person, say you charge them $1,800 in this example, and you do that for 5 years, your amount comes out to, you've gained $159,000. So you have $159,000 versus $96,000. Again, this is just one example, but it does show that with home appreciation and being able to rent an ADU out, it can be a pretty lucrative investment. Okay, so say that sounds good to you and you want to move forward. So how do you pay for it in the first place? So that's actually a really challenging impact of this industry still. Banks are not currently able to lend you for a mortgage or a construction loan. They're not able to use an ADU as collateral, so they can't give you a typical mortgage, or they can't give you a typical construction loan. So your normal sources of financing for building a structure are different than what they would normally be. It's a little more challenging. So what can you do? Well, what most people do, for about 75% of people, what they do is they use equity that they've built up in their home. So if you bought an $800,000 home and you've paid off $300,000 of the actual principal of it, so you have $300,000 equity, banks will usually loan you about 70% of the equity that you have in your home. So you can get a loan for $210,000. So if that is not enough, or if you want to choose a different route, and again, this is all about finding a different source of collateral, because right now banks are not allowed, to my understanding, to use the ADU as collateral. So you can use home equity as collateral. If you have an investment portfolio of stocks, bonds, etc., you can use that as a collateral to either make up the difference or to use as its own loan. Or three, another way is there's kind of a new industry popping up where those lenders for ADU construction, and the way that that usually works is that they want an ownership stake in the ADU in exchange for what they loan you, and so they'll loan you more money the higher stake they get in the ownership of the ADU. Now, usually in these arrangements, you will, as the homeowner, you will be able to keep your rental income, from what I understand. You'll be able to keep that, but the actual value of the ADU, a portion of that or all of that even, can go to this ADU lender. And so that can get kind of tricky 20 years down the road when you own your primary home and some other company owns your ADU, and if the loan's been sold 5 times, it can get kind of complicated, and I don't think anyone knows how that's going to turn out yet, to be honest, from what I can tell. So So this is just kind of the last part. So there is some interesting innovations in this project, in this process, trying to figure out ways around some of the issues we've talked about. So there's a backyard homes project, which will actually give you low interest construction loans. If you agree to rent to a low income individual for 5 years, and you have to sign a deed restriction saying that you'll do that. LA, we were talking about this at the very beginning, LA just recently approved and released their kind of quote standard plans. So it's 20 pre-approved designs. And the advantages of this is that it can really cut your design and permitting time down. So they say it can go from months down to as much as 1 day. You know, I don't know if it'll be that quick, but since they're pre-approved, it'll get approved quicker. However, it should be noted that these pre-approved plans do have a design that goes along with them, so they may not actually be approved in HPOZs if they don't match the historic character of the HPOZ. So it's just something to be aware of with these standard plans. And lastly, there's an ADU accelerator program. So this is if you already own or you already have built an ADU. And you don't, you know, you're having trouble finding a good tenant or a tenant period. The city of Los Angeles will actually guarantee you rent payments of the amounts shown below. So $1,765, and it doesn't change based on where you are in the city. For $1,765 for a 1-bedroom ADU, the city will guarantee that rent payment for you so long as you house a low-income senior resident in your unit. So these are just kind of some of the innovations. So anyway, that's kind of the lowdown on many aspects of the ADU industry. And if there's any questions or discussion, we can do that now.
A question from Paul Kane. Paul, can you unmute yourself? There you go.
Yes, I've 2 questions. Hi, Kevin. Thanks for
Hi.
presenting this.
No problem.
Two of my questions. So one of them is, do you have any insight as to how they determine the square footage? And so the example I'm thinking of is if I wanted to build not only an ADU, but say part of the structure would be dedicated to being more like a storage unit, like a replacement for a storage shed in the backyard. And say the overall square footage of the structure is above 750. What, and this, I'm asking this question in relation to all those associated like fees that you talked about. If the square footage goes about over 750 square feet, if the structure that was like a dedicated ADU for rental was 750, but it was within a structure that had maybe 150 square feet that was used for storage. Do you know how that's counted?
I don't completely know, but my guess would be that the portion they care about the part that's able to be used by a tenant. So if my guess would be if that is 750 square feet or below, then you would be able to avoid the impact fees, and then they might assume that the storage component that's for you is for you and not for the tenant. So that is what I would guess, but I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that.
I would agree with that. It's what you show on your plans is what they will permit. If the plan checker has a question about it, and like you have obviously a bedroom sized storage area with a place for a door, they might question it, but that's been the case forever with plan checkers. They have to use their discretion about whether you're trying to avoid something or not. And they may call you out on it, and then you're always in danger of getting an inspector or a permit or someone coming around and inspecting your unit.
Right.
John?
Well, Laura's jumping in on this. The LA City ordinance versus the state ordinance gives for a 1,200 square foot maximum under our ordinance for a one detached ADU behind or around whatever, a single family home. And it can be up to 2 stories in height, which may or may not work in a you know, an HPOZ. But the point is, I don't think if of the 1,200 square feet you show on the plans 300 as storage and 900 as habitable space, that would necessarily be a problem. I also don't think you can have 1200 plus 500 attached to each other easily, even though your lot size may allow it. I mean, in other words, if what you're trying is a streamlined approach to an approval for an ADU and only an ADU, it might be difficult to also have a storage space. It is not impossible to have a garage and storage space separate and apart from the ADU, however, as
Yeah,
I
I think-
understand it, but that's a different approval process. Okay,
Yeah, I
so
think the more
Audrey had her hand up. Oh, Kevin's
Yes,
going
you
to
did.
answer further, then Audrey, then Michael.
Well, no, I was just going to say, yeah, the more I think about it, the more I think that, yeah, the ADU is kind of one project, and even if they're connected, the storage is kind of a separate project that's related to your main home.
Got
Right.
it.
So,
And then
Yeah,
may
I
I do
was-
my second question real quick?
Sure.
Okay, question is it true that in constructing an ADU, a separate sewer line would have to be placed and not tied in? You can't tie
Yes.
it into your existing?
No,
so my understanding is that you're able to tie into the existing.
that's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Right. I'm going to jump in again. It is, I think that's correct. We're all guessing. I think that's correct, but I think you have to, this is the point where you have to prove, and many of us cannot because of the date of construction of our homes. You have to prove or get a permit to connect your old sewer line, your own sewer line on your house to the city sewer, even if it's been connected for 100 years, if there's no existing permit that they can find. And that trigger, I mean, in other words, you might be triggering some more expenses. A CCTV camera thing.
Can I weigh in?
Other thing.
Can I weigh in on that, Laura? It's been my
Right.
experience that in cases, it can go both ways, depending on the calculations associated with the size of the existing sewer line. So there's
Right.
no hard and fast answer to this. And then in regard to the question regarding the storage area, I believe, and Kevin, you can back me up on this, it may be that you have to demonstrate an occupancy separation to prove that it's going to be a dedicated storage unit.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because, yeah, it would be two different occupancies. So there might be an occupancy separation and then a fire rating requirement for the wall between it. Yeah.
Which wouldn't be too difficult. Might be another layer of drywall if someone felt it was a hazard, but it should be fairly easy. But
Yeah.
yes, I think that's true.
Thank you very much for doing this presentation, Kevin. My
Yeah.
question had to do with what any sort of review under an HPOZ could take place. My understanding is that the HPOZs, the boards have no discretionary authority, don't get to review these. So I don't know why a prefab style house, ADU, could not be plugged into the middle of a historic zone.
Mhm.
The second
Talk a
part of
little
our
bit about that,
presentation
Kevin.
tonight, Audrey, the second part, I'm going to go through the HPOZ thing. Kevin may know the answer, but
Can we do that now?
Well,
Yeah,
the one thing I do know is that many municipalities in general, and I would think HPOZs in particular throughout California, if you have on the exterior of your building a gabled roof and clapboard siding, that is what you have to use on the ADU as well. So I'm not sure how that interacts with LA's standard designs. Like if you pick a standard Adobe looking design, but put it in an HPOZ, I'm not sure if it has to be covered with the same material that your main house is covered with. But from what I know, that it would be the case. So I'm not sure how the LA standard program works on that. But in general, it has to match your house.
oh, okay. Audrey, your hand's still up. So do you have another question?
No.
Okay.
Well, just to follow on that, apparently it's the plan checkers who have to decide what's matching.
Mm,
That's
Basically,
yeah.
So I think Laura is going to be talking about this. I just know what we have in Jefferson Park, that it does have to go through the preservation plan, and the planner has discretion over, but the board doesn't. It's the board discretionary review, but it's still like in Audrey and Jefferson Park, Max does review them. but whether he's doing it skillfully, but I do know there are some the preservation plan rules do apply.
Okay. Yeah, it's complicated. So
It's complicated.
do we have more questions for Kevin on on everything except HPOZs?
I think Audrey's trying to talk, but she's muted.
You're muted. Audrey's muted.
I don't know how. I didn't do it. Swear. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Mute.
Audrey, I'm sorry, you're muted. Oh, there we go. Okay.
So sorry. So John, it's the planning staff that is responsible for HPOZ work that does the review of them. And so they're charged with responsibility for deciding
If
that
you
they
need,
conform to the adopted plan. Is that correct?
Correct.
You're
That's how I understand it, but I don't know how rigorous they are, and I know there's a limit. You can't do a preservation plan rule that limits your ability to do the ADU.
Right.
But it's about cosmetic, gable roof, and how it relates. They do have discretion over that if it's described in the plan clearly, but you can't limit. You can't say the ADU is too big. You gotta.
Right, I understand that. Okay, thank you.
Well,
Thanks.
well, to clarify, you can't say the ADU is too big unless it is too big, meaning we have an ordinance that specifies the maximum.
Yes,
So you can't do a 1,500 square foot ADU.
correct. Regardless, that's
Regardless.
of HPOZ.
I'm going to interject here. I just want to ask that when we do get to the part about HPOZs and ADUs, that maybe we can comment on the review process.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to get to here.
Well, I know, but in relation to a home over in Western Heights that recently built an ADU that appears to not have been subject to any oversight at all. It's just a stucco two-story box that doesn't look like anything like the surrounding homes.
And I think that's maybe the planner wasn't skilled, or maybe they got a directive, but it's anyway. Lori, you have the.
Yeah, I need Kevin to unshare.
Oh, Kevin, can you unshare?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
It's like, I'll share, but I don't know how to get rid of his share. Unless by me sharing it gets rid of it. That's possible.
I don't know if I am. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. Stop share.
There we go.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, so and give me a moment because I really had already pulled it up, but I have too many things open. And I don't think you want to see some of these other things I have open. I'm hoping this is the correct one. Yes. Okay, so how ADUs are processed within the city's historic districts is actually becoming very controversial. And I'm going to tell you the PS first. The presentation I'm about to show you was presented to the city's Cultural Heritage Commission on March 18th. And basically after the presentation, they were having none of it. And basically they have set up a subcommittee of the Cultural Heritage Commission to try to come to some better terms and understanding, because apparently the city's current processing they never vetted it through the Cultural Heritage Commission. So as best I say. So anyway, can you see the shared screen?
Yes.
Okay. And John, you're going to have, obviously I don't have the narrative other than what's here.
Sure.
So what you can remember and what I can remember. So some of this is likely to just overlap what Kevin just said. So essentially we just discussed all the different legislation. And then all jurisdictions must provide by right, or what they call ministerial approvals of ADUs that comply with the state standards. Can't deny an ADU based on other local policies or standards, and establish some mandatory state standards. And like we just discussed, expanded the allowances, allowed for a junior ADU, modified standards for conversions, These are things we just discussed, and up to 150 square feet of new floor area for ingress and egress. So cities like Los Angeles cannot unreasonably restrict ADUs. And so this is what our city is saying, cannot enforce any subjective guidelines or discretionary reviews. So the word subjective did not occur in the state law on ADUs. That word is actually in SB 330, but our city has sort of put the two together. SB 330 is a different housing legislation, but we can create reasonable regulations, health and safety, and we can create standards that prevent adverse impacts on any real property that is listed in the California Register of Historic Resources. So any property that is a contributor or altered contributor in an HPOZ, plus anything that's listed individually or as a contributor in a California Register or a National Register Historic District, plus all the historic cultural monuments, and harder to find, but there's a ton of other properties throughout the city and elsewhere that are listed by consent on the National Register as a result of federal funding used for some kind of public project, and some Section 106 review was done. So that's very technical, and we don't come across that here in UNNC very often. We do have some parts of Jefferson Park that are also listed by consent on the National Register, but they're in the HPOZ. So for example, 31st Street from Arlington to 4th Avenue is also sort of secretly on the National Register from some consent designations years ago. But all of those are listed in the California Register of Historic Resources. So theoretically, the city of LA can create standards that prevent adverse impacts on those properties.
Laura,
Michael has his hand up.
question. What do you mean by, and what is meant by, prevent adverse impacts?
Well,
And who-
that's where the discussions are getting quite sticky and controversial. We haven't really, Paul just brought up one, but we haven't had a lot of issues yet here in UNNC. In University Park, there's a ministerial approval that is raising a lot of eyebrows and lawyer letters, where an old carriage house is being redone as an ADU, and this HPOZ unit that is permitting, this is all on plans because it hasn't built yet, is permitting the removal of the original barn doors and a complete change out and a door on the side and windows where the barn doors were. And everybody's saying, well, that's just stupid. Put the windows in the barn doors. Don't remove the barn doors. So this is why it's becoming so controversial, and you'll see as we go through this.
Wait, one more question. You just said everybody.
And the
So
people everybody who's pissed off, and the people who aren't pissed off may not know about it. Can I just say it that way?
Okay, so here's okay. I don't want to start a big long thing, but I'm just trying to understand why isn't this falling
people
under
who
the
are active in that community and who worked to create, and it happens to be a imposing National Register monument as well as something within an HPOZ. So it's an individually important building.
Okay, last question. Why isn't this falling under the purveyance of the local HPOZ board?
That is why I'm trying to get through this presentation. You'll see why, and you'll see why I gave you the last answer first, which is the Cultural Heritage Commission wasn't buying into it and set up now a subcommittee to further review. So if I can,
go ahead.
Okay, so let me take it away and I'll try to get through it quick. Okay, and then we can have as lively a discussion as you guys want. And noting, I did not make this presentation. Okay, so in the city of LA, we did adopt in December 2019 our own ordinance. We allow movable tiny houses as ADUs. they have limited the ADUs in the high fire zones and the hillside areas, because given that there may not be parking, they can't allow parking on the street either in the fire zones on the hillsides, because of, when fire trucks need to go up and down narrow curvy streets. So they've limited the ADUs in the hillside areas. They've restricted but not eliminated ADUs in front yards. I think prevent driveway expansion in front yards is again meant to not have parking in the front yards. And they've removed building distancing requirements. So usually for, again, fire code, I don't know how they did this, it's 10 feet between buildings, and that's been eliminated. And so the implementation, I can post this where they see this thing, this interdepartmental memo. I can post that into the agenda packet. So it's about 14 pages. So it includes the chart that Kevin showed you and some other language. So I'll post that in the agenda packet. Okay. So here. So basically, there's different kinds of ADUs. It's too hard to read all of this, but it's all on that chart that was in Kevin's, and I'll post it separately as well, the memo. But the way they wrote the ordinance, even if there's a let's say a 3-unit building in an R1 zone, but it's on a large lot and there's room for an ADU, you can have the ADU. So in other words, the zoning does not matter if a building was legally built as a multifamily home residence, and then the zone is single family. That multifamily residence can have one more ADU. And there are some limitations. Unless it's owner occupied, and unless it's a single family, they're not going to be allowed to have a J ADU, the junior. And otherwise, they are saying HPOZ review is administrative by staff using, quote, objective standards in adopted preservation plans. The biggest controversy is deciding what is objective in the plans. So, skip this one and go straight to that. So John and I, and most of the people involved with HPOZs, have been to at least one, maybe more, training sessions on the definition of an objective standard. It's to be predictable, objective, fixed, quantifiable, and clear standards to be applied in the review of ADUs. For a standard to be considered objective, it has to be sufficiently clear or quantifiable to ensure there's no personal judgment involved by the decision makers, only ministerial. Most preservation plans have chapters devoted to additions and accessory structures. The HPOZ staff supposedly implements all objective standards found within the relevant chapters of each plan. And then beyond that, the staff also strongly encourages compliance with all the rest of the guidelines. This is to individual builders within relevant chapters. This is sort of a game. This is the language in a preservation plan. Detached garages are preferred. Attached garages, when found to be compatible, should be located to the rear of the house. And we're supposed to guess, is that an objective standard or a subjective standard? John, what's your guess?
Subjective.
Well, that is in fact what they say, that's subjective. So John will attest. He and I probably argued a lot when we were writing the Jefferson Park preservation plan. I kept saying throughout that this this standard shall be here, shall. And others on the writing committee said, no, shall sounds like people will be upset if we say shall. So let's say should. It's our preference. So the Jefferson Park preservation plan, and probably most of the others, edged away from the word shall and towards the word should because we wanted to be nice. And now that's sort of biting us in the I'm not going to say the rest of that sentence. Okay. Accessory structures should always be diminutive in height with an area in comparison to the existing primary structure. Objective or subjective? Audrey, I'll let you guess.
I would guess objective.
Objective?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see.
I
Yeah.
agree.
You win.
And
I don't know
can I,
what you
can I
win.
just reiterate what you just said, Laura, about when these plans were first being drafted, is that OHR encouraged everyone as well to make these flexible and subjective, to provide leeway for the appointed boards to make decisions about, and now it is biting us in the rear end, because OHR is in no mood to let us go back and revise these plans to make them more objective at this point. It would be one thing if we found, oh, well, this isn't working for us, now let's change it. We're not really being allowed to change it.
Well, it's not only that. And so here, I mean, we're going to keep going and talking. New accessory structures, garages, and additions to existing accessory structures should be similar in character to those which historically existed in the area. So this is like Paul's complaint. So Paul, what do you think? Objective or subjective standard?
Sorry, I was distracted. I'm going to have to pass on your question.
Oh, no. Okay. Anyone want to take this? Is this?
Well, I'll take it. That's subjective.
Okay. I
I
think
agree.
we're, yep. So they're saying now, and again, this totally conflicts with what we had heard over the years. We used to evaluate new construction in part with the Sanborn maps and other things that had previously existed either on a parcel or in its community. And all of a sudden now we are being told that that's subjective, and they should be similar in character to things which historically existed, is no longer an objective standard, or never was, but is no longer a standard to use. Okay, addition roofing forms and materials should echo those of the original structure. Anybody?
Ooh,
Yeah, that one's tough. Echo. What the hell does that mean?
exactly.
So what do you think? Subjective?
Subjective.
I'm gonna say subjective. Yeah.
Yep, subjective. And
Gee.
yet, would you really want to have a tile roof on a craftsman-esque cottage that's an ADU in the backyard when everything on the front house is, you know, composition shingle? Just saying. But should echo is apparently subjective.
Yep. But even
Okay.
what you just
New-
said, Laura, is open to opinion.
I know. I mean, should echo is just a bad phrase. I mean, I agree. Evoke, echo, we use it all the time when writing about historical things, but apparently not for preservation plans. New accessory structures, including greenhouses, porches, or gazebos, should not take up more than 50% of the available backyard.
That's objective.
Objective.
Yep,
Easy.
right.
And they've made a point to say that the should and the shalls aren't really the key word. It's about whether it's should be something that's quantifiable. And they've been interpreting that as a shall. So if it says 50%, that's it. You get 50%.
Well, yeah, that's really clear. But well, I'll wait to tell you the other controversial thing. Let's get through this. So the Secretary of Interior Standards for Rehabilitation. Remember that in the Jefferson Park HPOZ, we included the Secretary of Interior Standards as a call out and on a page within the preservation plan. I do not believe Harvard Heights or Western Heights or West Adams Terrace has that in their preservation plans. So, but they're saying, but wait, the Secretary of Interior Standards for Rehabilitation are intentionally subjective to allow for flexibility, but staff strongly encourages ADU compliance with standards, and the staff will require a redesign of the ADU if potential for adverse impacts to historical resources. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Okay, so, okay. Impacts on resources, and I know somebody already asked this question. Majority of the ADU projects involve garages. In most cases, ADUs that adhere to objective guidelines are considered to have no adverse impact on the HPOZ. And this is our historical resource because this was prepared specifically about HPOZs. If an adverse impact is proposed, the staff works with applicants to find an alternative path for approval. Garages are often not included as character defining in historic resource surveys. Many are altered or constructed outside the period of significance. So I will say, jumping in, those are two different and unrelated concepts that should not be combined in a single bullet point. Obviously, if a current garage is altered or constructed outside the period of significance, it's not a character defining feature. But the fact that a garage was not included as a character defining feature in the historic resource survey, but if it is determined by either its look or you can find a building permit to have been built early and maybe by the same famous architect, it is a character defining feature and you just need to alter the survey, not demolish the building. This is my opinion, but that is also, again, the standard we've always used apparently until now. And it is, in fact, the standard that OHR is using in the Arlington Heights and the other CPIOs that have historic. They are requiring the retention of garages, at least some of the time, that are historic and not allowing the demolition. So this one bullet point should be two different, my opinion, and we have always looked further into what appear to be the carriage house, the barns, the early structures that are clear. We've always done further research into them. So I'm saying that's not a statement of fact. And as mentioned before, all of these other districts include the Office of Historic Resources architect review. So historic individual landmarks, National Register District, California Register District are supposed to include Lambert Gasinger or his designee, I suppose, for compliance with objective standards. So we're back to demolition of garages. Garages are often not contributing to the designation of the property. HPOZ ordinance includes considerations for demolition of garages. And I don't know when they decided there were streamlined provisions to review demolition of garages. I do not recall ever an ordinance related to that having ever been passed. Okay, case studies. I don't know what this is. John, we've seen this before, but what do we think this is? Is this two different properties or the same one?
I think it's the same one.
Right, and what is it that what do we think we're looking at? Just existing garage door? This is just about a garage. Okay, I'm moving on.
It's about garage conversion. It says garage conversion on top.
Right. Okay. I'm just garage addition.
What I don't get here is that, so if you go back to the other one, you know, I cross my fingers that the planning department says, hey, it'd be great if you put a diagonal board across your doors.
Yes,
but
here, that.
There's nothing in the
I know.
preservation plan that says make it look like old barn doors. So therefore, all this is recommended, but can't be mandated.
You think this is subjective? This is where I find it subjective. I mean, in other words, this to me, I'm going backwards now. This is subjective unless they had a photograph. Meaning we're not supposed to be guessing at what it might have looked like historically either. So I'm that, to me, that's more subjective than everything else. But anyway, so I'm going forward. I'm sorry, I'm not able to give you the verbiage on the case studies because I wasn't involved in these case studies. They're showing this as an existing elevation they've made. So here's a short little roof, whoops. And then the here we see it, that gable has gotten taller. I don't really know, to be honest, how this one's better or worse than this one. Oh, I see what it is. So what they've done here is they've added this window. And John, does this imply to you that they're building an attic gable habitable space?
It does.
Where they needed to have enough air and light and perhaps egress in an emergency?
It does.
Okay, well, that's probably what that's about then. And then this down here, that looks to be divided light French doors as opposed to garage doors. And, right, so. On this one, they brought, what was proposed was this big ass thing and they brought it down to a smaller thing. Got it?
And but that one I can see, because that one, if this is in an HPOZ, it's not diminutive.
Right, it's not
Yeah.
diminutive, yes. But I'm not sure how that then intersects the other law that allows something to be 2 stories and 1,200 feet. You know, so again, this is a little confusing how they're actually applying things. And I don't think the ADU is something that's particularly of controversy here. Okay, question. So I'm going to go back to this.
I think
That right here, staff will require redesign of the ADU if potential for adverse impacts to historical resources. So where we seem to be having an issue, there's a couple of places we're having issues. One is if a carriage house, a barn, you know, an original garage that's clearly from 1899 or 1903 or 1905, if it's clear, if they're also saying garages are not contributors, then they're going to allow all kinds of changes to it. So that's an issue number 5 as opposed to number 1, but it's becoming obvious. In University Park, they have also been allowing the construction of ADUs visible on a driveway in front of garages. So if you're a passerby, you've got a main house and a driveway which was leading into a historical garage, which is still going to stay there. But now hiding that garage is an ADU in front of it and in direct line of sight. So there's some discussion about how is that okay? Is that not an adverse impact on the historic district? And it's an unanswered question. And then I'm again going back to this thing. So the big question that has been asked over and over again in these presentations by the Office of Historic Resource to the HPOZ boards, I've sat through 3 or 4 of the presentations now. So the same question has been asked over and over again. Can each HBOZ board go through its own preservation plan and highlight, in their opinion, what is objective and what is subjective within their own plans? And every time someone asks that question, I have to say John Kaliski, who's an architect who is on the, I want to say, Carthay Circle board, but he's, maybe Wilshire. He's in one of the Wilshire Center area HPOZs, and he used to work for the Community Redevelopment Agency. So he's a very experienced architect. He has asked that question not once, but twice. Every single time the question is asked, Ken Bernstein says, as if he hadn't heard it before, that's a good idea. But they haven't done anything about it. Like, it's a good idea. So that's a problem that is not really resolved yet. Also, the staff keeps saying that it is the city attorney who has decided that the preservation plans by and large are subjective and not objective, and that the city attorney has written a memo about it. And many people have requested in email and in writing, but I don't know if someone's filed an official public records request, the copy of that memo. So far, no one has seen this purported memo. So we don't really know what it says, but OHR, which stands for Office of Historic Resources, keeps saying it's the city attorney has instructed them that they have to do this. So, so again, the Cultural Heritage Commission, now I'm going to go to that slide that says questions. Cultural Heritage Commission had an awful lot of questions, and then in the end they said this does not sound right, and they've set up a subcommittee of the commission to look further into it. So I'm going to stop the share and say questions, discussion.
So the thing that's, I can understand why the state law and even the city doesn't want people using HPOZ to stop ADUs, because everyone knows that HPOZs can and have been used as ways to block development because people don't like it for whatever reason. But on the other hand, I see there was a fire at a house on 31st Street about a year and a half ago, and the addition, that's the part of the back of the house is burned off. And by HPOZ standard, you get to build back what was there. You don't have to come to the board. But what they're building back is a bigger addition that has an 80 unit that never came to the board. And I'm just crossing my fingers that the planner did a good job. It's a great old house, that they did a good job with the design review, but they aren't designers. And they're really, that the boards are an experienced group of designers and real estate folks. And that what they've basically said is like, we don't want your input, even though it may be better than what the planners are doing. And so I'm crossing my fingers that the planner didn't screw this house up, and we could have we could have put some input in, not to block it, but to make it as best as it could be. And so that's what dismays me, and that's why we all are just holding our breaths, going, "Please, planners, don't screw up." And that puts us at a disadvantage.
Well, the truth is, again, I'm being very opinionated, but the truth is, having a consultation with an HPOZ board, whichever HPOZ it is not creating an entitlement process.
Yeah.
All it is a consultation where a bunch of people can brainstorm with the person proposing it, and maybe they'll get a better outcome, because the truth is, since a lot of people are building these things to add value to their properties, and in the short run to use them for Zoom rooms or guest house, or where, some people built them very quickly for quarantine spaces, people in healthcare, to have a place if they needed to have a place, and weren't building them as rentals, but they are hoping to enhance their property value. So one would think in an HPOZ, you enhance your property value in part by having a compatible, to not have something that someone comes in and says, ugh, I'm buying a house in a historic district and I don't want something that's incompatible in the backyard, and I don't want to spend the money to make it look better. So I feel that there's no reason in a ministerial review, non-discretionary ministerial review, where they still have up to 60 days. I mean, that's the law. Doesn't have to be done in one day. That I don't see why they can't have a consultation with the board. For, I mean, they're saying they can, and I don't see why they can't.
I agree, Audrey. It's free advice. It's free.
It's free professional advice. When this issue comes up, when one is talking to people who are going, oh, I don't want to go to them. It's like, hello, how much would you pay for a group of architects and seasoned real estate professionals to have an over the shoulder on your project? Really? Right.
And then also just this notion of somebody who's not a person who helped write a preservation plan or who has been knee deep, they're on the board, they're living these preservation plans, not even reviewing the preservation plans with each board to go through and say, okay, we think this is objective and we think this is not. there's some other things. I mean, it doesn't matter here, but there's the city attorney is apparently saying the phrase prevailing setback is subjective. And it's like, but it's a standard that's been in use for decades and it's mathematical, the prevailing setback. Again, not applying to ADUs, but it's like when the lawyers start defining what is subjective and what is objective, you're in trouble. So I would like each HPOZ to be able to review its own preservation plan with an eye to objective versus subjective, and be granted the ability where it seems appropriate to make those changes. And Kevin, I think you can help me. SB 330 is a law that did say you can't change until 2025 for housing projects, changing your codes to make them more objective. But I don't think SB 330 applies for preservation plans for ADUs, correct? I mean, there's no connectivity between those two.
I'm looking it up right now on our thing. I do know, it sunsets in 2025.
Right. Well, SB 330 kind of was nasty and saying, don't hurry up and change your laws. But that was not about ADUs. I don't think SB 330 addresses ADUs at all.
It does.
I don't think so. Yeah.
But it does address the subjective objective thing, and don't.
But it's for housing projects, and ADUs are not housing projects.
Okay.
I mean, in other words, it's the conflating thing. So, in other words, I feel that there's no legal reason why each HPOZ board can't review its own preservation plan and propose some important tweaks if needed for accessory structures and ADUs, or even add a chapter on ADUs and run afoul of anything. I don't see how it runs afoul of anything. Okay, and Paul, one of the Pauls has a question.
Blake had his hand up as well.
Okay, so Blake, then Paul, but I'm not sure if it's really Paul Nielsen or if it's Paul King, but in any case, Blake, then Paul.
This is just another anecdote, John. There's on Oxford, there's a house that recently sold, and they're sort of renovating the main structure, and they're building an ADU, and it looks to be that it's just going to be a big stucco box. And the house is a gabled house with lap siding, and it's just at the back of the property. I understand there are rules about the sizes of it. It looks gigantic. And then the other issue that's interesting is the people who recently bought a house on Westmoreland, they now have their sort of like this big slab that they're having to look at that's sort of over the back of their property line. And I don't know if in terms of trying to vet the process and to see how city planning is doing in terms of what you say, fingers crossed that they're doing a good job. If they're the last line of defense or the only line of defense, it's like, does it make sense to start aggregating examples where it seems like a bad ADU has been built in a historic district? I don't know if there's a way to track that, that people who are interested in it, we could create like just a little online database, and people could, anecdotally submit information, and because it just seems like this one property would be sort of a bad example of that. It doesn't seem like it's representing any kind of historic character. So I don't know if there's anything actionable in trying to track bad ADUs. Sounds mean, but it sounds like the worst thing on Nextdoor ever. But that's not the point of it. It's just like trying to give ammunition in a way to improving the situation and taking advantage of existing, governmental bodies to prevent people from doing the wrong thing. So that's all.
Okay, Paul.
Yeah,
Whichever Paul it is.
It's Paul King, so I'm hijacking Paul Nielsen's laptop. So first of all, you can hear me? I just want to check.
Yes.
Okay, so I think my comment or question relates to what Blake said, and So I just remember when I was reading, I believe it was the LA Times story that talked about like the 20 pre-approved, designs for the ADUs. And what I was kind of hoping to see in there was maybe 2 or 3 or 4 that could be used or were approved sort of for HPOZs. And
Right.
there was really nothing. So I'm
There
wondering
was
whether
nothing, absolutely nothing.
so my question is that something that this committee could advocate for, or, in order to have them provide some for HPOZs that we could just sort of take as, at least as models to start from?
I think that would be I thought Laura's idea of asking for consultations to at least say, try this, try this, try this is what we do in consultations. And I think having some style conscious or style responsive designs would be a good seed for an action, which we can take if we so choose tonight.
Right. Well, I'm thinking in general that I'm looking at the calendar. I'm thinking what we should do is take all these ideas we're talking about, but we have 2 more meetings before the next governing board. At one of the 2 meetings, we should have a draft memo/letter that we're asking the neighborhood council to approve for us to send into the Cultural Heritage Commission, and as well, and OHR and the leadership there. So, I mean, I don't want to try and write a letter tonight on the fly, but taking this conversation and maybe going a little farther. Okay, so I'm going to be, John, I can't do 2 things at once. So I don't know if anybody else has their hands up. I'm quickly reading a letter written by a lawyer. I mean, to me, I want to quickly look at that. Well,
before we start this, I know Kevin's going to be really polite because he's our guest, but I know he has to leave. And so,
right.
So Kevin.
Well, no, this has been very, very interesting to listen to. So I appreciate you guys letting me join and letting me listen in to you talk and discuss afterwards. And thank you for letting me present to you. So it's been fun.
Thanks, Kevin.
Right.
Thanks for all your work putting that together.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so what I would like to do is not take an action tonight, but I see there is a 23-page lawyer letter that I didn't put in our agenda packet that I will add to. So for everybody who's here, I'm gonna add a few things into the current agenda packet that I'll then transfer the ADU things to one of the 2 next meetings. I mean, John and I'll figure it out, but they'll be in this packet. There's a letter from a woman named Amy Mintier, who's an attorney who represents both the Los Angeles Conservancy and West Adams Heritage Association. I think the letter said it's for WAHA, but the Conservancy signed on to it. And it's a letter basically to the city saying, here's how you're doing it wrong. But I don't want to share it. I mean, it's not in the packet now, it's 23 pages. So I'm going to put it up into the packet for people to read. And my suggestion would be that essentially we continue this conversation, but with a letter that perhaps John and I have drafted, either on April 21st or on May 5th. That's going to be dependent on if we have cases that we have to process, but that's either one of those is before the next board meeting. And do we have any other discussion on this? Because our meeting doesn't have to be over, even though Kevin.
Just a small comment about one of the features of this letter is going to be to encourage the city to allow HPOZ boards to do consultations. And I just wanted to say that I think that you would find that the HPOC staff themselves would appreciate the opportunity to hear aired what those comments of their board are, even though that's the last time the board is ever going to see it again, that they can go forth, and it gives them ammunition for the inevitable arm twisting that goes on at public counters that results in what you see get built out there. It would, I think, be a great advantage to them that I would hope that most of them would really appreciate that. Hopefully it wouldn't dig in too much to that 60-day limit.
Well, yes, and I don't think it would. I mean, the HPOZs meet every 2 weeks or twice a month, as it turns, but I don't think,
60 days is a heartbeat.
right. Well, 60 days is a heartbeat, but scheduling to an HPOZ is simply 15 days or less, right? For a consultation, there's no action, there's no nothing. It's just a consultation. That's
Well,
my,
It depends on what state the plans are when they come in, of course, but
Right.
It certainly would be, I would hope, be viewed as a benefit to the staff to get that kind of input, because it arms them with more arguments if they have a recalcitrant applicant on their hands.
Mhm.
Just
Yeah.
saying.
Okay, so John and I are both typing things that might be the same.
No, we just did.
No, well, I know, but I'd say allow them.
I'm
So
just-
I'm
I'm
going to
just-
say the words out loud. Allow the preservation plans to be modified. Right?
And I also put in there, provide consultations,
Right,
provide.
I'm not writing that. Yeah.
Provide plans that are stylistically appropriate for HPOZs and compile examples of good and bad ADUs as points
Right.
of discussion.
Right. But I mean, in other words, there's no reason why a preservation plan in a Jefferson Park can't say as additional modified language, the primary architectural style in Jefferson Park is Craftsman. If it is a Craftsman house in the front, the ADU should have Craftsman elements. If it is not a Craftsman house in the front and is a Spanish style house in the front, it would be inappropriate to have a Craftsman cottage, although probably it would not be inappropriate in the back. I mean, here's the irony of all of this. There was a company, and I'm suddenly forgetting what its name is, but in the, between 1916 and around 1925, it was a company that did plans for cottages and bungalows that were, you could buy just the plan, but you could also buy the lumber. Each piece of lumber would come with its parts. There's a catalog. I have the catalog. And throughout our community, there's just many of these little bungalow homes. And in where I live in Angeles Vista, there's one next door to me in the backyard, and there's one next door to that in the backyard. I mean, this is not a new idea at all.
I have the plans for my house from those catalogs.
Right. And there's just no reason. I mean, we're not inventing something new. It's a century old. And and frankly, that whole damn catalog, and I really do have a copy of it. I'm just not remembering what it's called, but I did a HCM nomination at 1828 Gramercy, and the rear house is from, clearly it's catalog number 72 or something like that. Why can't that catalog be utilized by some designer to create a couple of designs for ADUs, because they're identical. It's the right size and everything, by way of example.
It would be interesting to have, if you had 50 pre-approved plans rather than just the 20.
Correct.
You had 5 Spanish, 5 Craftsman, 5 modern, 5 whatever, 5 and whatever, and 5 whatever. And then at least there's some options. But whether the planner can say, oh, I'm sorry, you have to use numbers 22, 27, or 28 in this HPOZ, I don't know. Is that objective? Is that subjective? What is that? And maybe that would become part of the modifications.
Well,
to
yeah,
HPOZ plans that ADUs have to follow these particular presets.
right.
I don't know, that's objective.
Right.
Sounds
And,
good to me.
yeah, and I'm sorry, it's the Pacific Ready Cut homes, but in other words, I actually have the catalog digitally.
But
And
it doesn't have to be, I'm sorry to interrupt, Laura, but it doesn't have to be designed where it's required. It could be designed where if you choose from these patterns, you get a streamlined process.
well, that is basically, that is what they're saying. So first of all, at building and safety, which is different than at planning, at building and safety, there's already a requirement that the approval process be streamlined, and it's supposed to be no more than 60 days. They're not following that rule, as far as I can tell, with COVID as the excuse. Just completely unrelated to our neighborhood, but I've got some plans for a house, ADU in a house in Boyle. I want to say it's in Boyle Heights. It might be in Lincoln Heights. That's been 2 years at Building and Safety, and what they're trying to do is legalize an unpermitted existing unit, but they're redesigning it so it'd be an ADU in this 120-year-old house. But it should have been approved by now based on all the laws. I mean, because there doesn't seem anything wrong with the design. So they're not following the 60-day rule. I mean, they should have either rejected it or approved it by now. I don't know if that same 60-day rule applies to planning. So in other words, I don't know if it's 60 days at planning and 60 days at building and safety, or if it's supposed to be just one 60-day period. And Kevin's gone, so I don't know if he knew it anyway. Anyway, so
Laura, is
Yeah.
there any way that you could share more widely that Pacific Ready Cut
Yes.
catalog digital
yes,
copy?
now that I
That would be awesome.
let
of
me
you to
just
do that.
see how big a file it is. Well, I just closed it out. So one way or another I can, but I might need someone with a high speed connection to upload it to the Google Drive. Meaning it's a digital file, but it may not be something I can email.
It might still be a monster, or you could Dropbox it.
Yes, but I just know here in the middle of COVID, when 3 of us are working from the same Wi-Fi, we sometimes just don't have bandwidth to upload 20 megabyte files, but other people do. I mean, in other words, I can put on a flash drive.
I could come over with a high capacity flash drive.
Absolutely. Yeah, on an individualized basis, Audrey, I can give you a copy real easy.
No, but
And
then I could do that.
Yeah,
I could expand that to Facebook, to
exactly.
the
But
Jefferson Park
it's a
web
catalog
page.
from 1923. I don't know if Building and Safety is going to think it's swell. Anyway, we'll see.
Well, not for building and safety's purposes, but just as a matter of general interest, I would
Sure.
think that would be a great resource to put up, say, on the Jefferson Park, historic Jefferson Park website.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I mean, so yes, my answer is basically yes.
Thank you.
And one way or another, we'll get it done. And if I can, if I can get it up onto everybody's Google Drive, that'd be great. And it's not a big secret. I mean, I can also backtrack and see if I can find the website where it came from.
There you go. A link is just as good.
Right. It's just that we worked on this particular historic cultural monument nomination several years ago, so I'd have to figure it out. Okay. Anyway,
The idea I just had, I mean, there are some well-designed ADUs that are being built. I wonder if the planners can say, wow, that's a good one. Can the city rent, lease, buy those plans, or can you have those plans available to be reused? Because you can just transport them. It's just soils that change basically, and maybe that those plans can just be recycled, and eventually there'll be a library of approved, plan check approved, structurally approved plans that people can tap into. Maybe there's a fee, and then people can start, making money. Might say I do a plan, and it's great, and then I make it available for $1,500, and just have a database so people can shop, and then it starts spreading out into the free market of plans, and the city becomes just an information shuffler.
well, the Pacific Ready Cut Homes Company had reported in the year 1923 that more than 100,000 people visited their showroom in downtown LA on Hill Street. Maybe that was a bit of hyperbole, but I mean, these were pre-cut, different version of prefab homes. So again, one of the things that Kevin brought up is it's really not necessarily easy to pop a prefab home into a backyard. I mean, for example, if I wanted to do it, I don't see how I could. I have a porte cochere. You know, you can't pick it up and over a porte cochere. So unless my next door neighbor was really happy with me and go down their driveway and tear down the fence, it wouldn't work. But a pre-cut home with all the pieces that you then build to the plans in a backyard is a different version of a prefab home. So, you know, and was made with wood, you know, because that's another thing. I mean, what are these things made of? So anyway, so we have a lot of ideas. Hi, Tori.
Hi, Laura.
We're almost done. We had a nice hour and a half chat. How are you?
I figured as much. I just got back in the office and I was just wanted to say, if you can send me the samples that I can look at, because we're looking into doing a couple of things in the next couple of months. And that prefab, who was that I had come and do a
Well, you
presentation?
had somebody present, yeah, you had somebody present at your committee, and that was
Yeah.
a single company that actually made, you know, their focus is on building ADUs. And were they prefab or were they just using the same plan over and over?
They have 3 different plans, a single, a 1-bedroom, and a 2-bedroom, and they come in 2 pieces. So they do everything at the manufacturer, then they level the garage, and then they put the 2 pieces on the lot with a little porch and all the appliances and everything. And they have set price, and everything's under 200,000.
Right. Well, I will say the one thing that has astonished me in these months of seeing various ADU presentations is, including this one, how darn expensive they are. I mean, because I will say a couple of years ago, people were saying 50,000, and this doesn't seem to be you can build one for 50,000 anymore.
Nope, it costs
Right.
$10,000 to dig a trench from your backyard to your sewer line.
Right.
Wow.
Well, I
I've-
do think that's another thing, I mean, very seriously, that people need to consider in our neighborhood. Our sewer lines living at the end of their lifetime for a lot of us. And so if you're considering doing an ADU, I think you need to add the cost of upgrading the whole line in your yard to the sewer, which is not going to be inexpensive. But
And it's a pain. I mean, I think other thing people don't realize that Kevin alluded to, having 9 months or 6 months of disruption and piles of dirt. I mean, it's just,
yeah, all that.
it's a difficult process.
Because you lived through that, right?
It was awful.
Right.
So, John, Laura.
I just resent, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna ask John, what happened? Do you remember the city was offering 75,000 towards ADUs to encourage people to get more involved? Have you heard anything about that lately?
I haven't heard of a direct subsidy like that.
Oh, it was LA. Well, it was LA Moss. We had a presentation from them, but they've
Yeah.
pivoted in COVID. Their focus right now is on something completely different.
Okay.
Blake, you had a question or a comment?
Oh, you're muted. Yeah, there you go.
I refinished my kitchen floors, and I had not had any access to my back hall or my kitchen for 6 days. And I said this morning that if I ever have to do that, I'm just going to sell my house.
Right.
So 6 months of an ADU, I'm just like, it's eye-opening. So the wrong day to ask me. I get to go in the kitchen tomorrow.
Right. Well, all I'm saying is my sewer line has been limping along fine, but limping along. I mean, I've had a look-see on a video, and as long as I don't do this and don't do that and do this and do that and have it serviced, at least twice a year, and every once in a while have it, water jetted, it's going to live a while. But at some point it isn't, because what we're all experiencing is they're old and worse because of the drought. The trees, and in my block in particular, the street trees, the ones on the parkways, are seeking water. So they're invading our sewer lines. And
Oh,
so
wow.
where I have a break, isn't even on my property because it goes at an angle. So where I have a problem is in the street in front of my next door neighbor's property, but it's my line. So,
But-
you know,
so
it's gonna be real expensive.
I think, isn't DWP responsible for the line after it leaves your property?
No, you
No.
are responsible all the way to
the
the center of
main.
the road or wherever the main, you know, wherever that sewer is sitting in the road. So while it's annoying, I mean, I'm saying I'm babying mine and have been for some years. And, you know, and I'm just really, really careful that nothing goes down the sewer except, you know, toilet paper, you know, nothing else goes down. And I have to have it jetted or something twice a year at least, just to make sure. But yeah, no, they're not responsible. That's the problem. I will say, and we're digressing, the city just passed a new thing. I don't want to say it's an ordinance. It's a program where they are going to help some homeowners with this issue of reconnecting to the sewer. They're going to have some subsidies, but that's not the same thing as helping us with the 20,000 it's going to take to get there. Just with the fee, I mean, as far as I can tell, it's just going to be the fees for redoing, connecting to the sewer. Yay for us.
Yep, it's,
Yeah, no, I mean, it just depends. If you're a lucky person, there's an alley behind your house and the sewer is in the alley and it's real close to where it needs to be. And you don't have to get a big permit for digging a big hole in the middle of the street. If you're an unlucky person, you have to, your sewer's in the street and you have to have a hole that's 20 feet deep in the street and it's open for days and your neighbors are not happy because they have to drive around it and you're going to spend a lot of money. And then if you're living in Angeles Vista where your lots are 200 feet deep and the streets are 100 feet wide and the sewer's in the middle of that, it's even more expensive. So what can I tell you? And so I don't know what we're all going to do, but as it relates to ADUs, you'll probably have to do it at the same time if you have one of these older sewers. And again, there's more and more of them just failing because the drought and the trees and the roots and everything, and they're old. So not a zoning issue, not a planning or land use issue, but a factor in all of this. So John, there may be some other things. So again, just to review, I'm going to post up into the Google Drive the letter from the lawyer, the full 14-page memo from the ZA as to how to process ADUs, and we'll work on a draft memo and come and have one more agenda item where we're going to vote before we hit the board.
it's good.
That anything else from anybody else? So anybody who has anything you want in the letter, just email John or I, because this will just be a draft. Don't email John and I though, please. Just choose one, just for Brown Act stuff.
Great.
Please.
Okay, I'm ready to.
Well, it's 9 o'clock almost. Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh,
Thanks for coming.
wait. We do have that last little agenda item, unless there's nothing to say, which would be there is an update. The last agenda item is follow up to previous cases, ENS and old business. So remember how we ended up doing a community impact statement on being in opposition to all the increases in fees because the Planning and Land Use Management Committee of the City Council was meeting again on April 6th because the prior meeting was canceled because they had technical issues. They canceled it again on April 6th when by 3 o'clock they couldn't get the phone lines to work. So that's still pending. So there's no resolution to whether or not they're going to increase appeal fees from $89 to $16,097, and triple, whatever the fees are proposed for historical. There's still no resolution. They still haven't had the meeting, but we did file our community impact statement on it. So that's my only update. John, is there anything?
I don't.
Okay, then we can shut down this meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
It is adjourned.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks.
Good
again.
night.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Laura,
Bye.
Laura, send me a
And
photo.
I need to email you that thing, Tori, I know.
Oh,
And
okay.
it's a,
No, no,
it's a
I
girl,
got that. Send me
Christina.
a
I'll
photo.
send it to you. I'll do it right now.
Okay, send me a photo of the ADU tonight.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.